Hi, I'm Jodi Lightner. I'm chair of the art department. I teach painting and drawing, and I keep an active studio practice in my studio in downtown Billings. I love making drawing and paintings about architecture and our response to these structures.
I wanted to ask you, what types of environments and places invite you to explore?
I'm fascinated by a lot of different places, mostly built structures, not the natural world, but things that have been created for human involvement, like how do we live in spaces? And some of the past projects have involved overrun shopping malls, dilapidated and abandoned resorts and tourist attractions. I've done a lot of work with tree houses and structures that are built for the imagination and play. And then I've also done projects where I'm delving into attics and cellars and other parts of our personal dwelling places. So I kind of run the gamut of a lot of different types of architecture, but I'm curious how we interact within them and the psychology of being in those spaces and what happens to those spaces when humans are no longer impacting them.
How does curiosity play a role in your work?
I think curiosity is a driving force. And I find things, little nuggets that spark my attention and make me want to know more. And I think that curiosity gives me the drive to dig deeper, to find different ways of looking at things, to find a way to look at something differently. So curiosity to me is one of those key ingredients that without it, the artwork doesn't necessarily find a voice of its own. With it, you can find all sorts of different nuances and meaning to attach it to the work itself.
Walk us through the process of building a drawing.
Oh, the studio process is a fun recipe. I think that every time you come into the studio, you have a pattern of working that may or may not be the same for everybody. So one of my processes is to start with a very abstract surface. I start with a lot of ink in an abstract way that causes a problem for me. So I give myself a challenge to solve. And out of that first initial ink drawing, I tease out the structure and the architecture, and I look for the secrets that it's holding within it. And I start drawing mechanically, a more technical drawing. And then from there, I build in imagery and color, and the tone of the piece comes out of like adding that last layer. It really draws in the meaning after the first initial abstraction.
So you have the abstracted elements, and then there's more recognizable elements. How do you decide those?
The elements that are drawn or illustrated within the work really come out of that element of curiosity that we talked about earlier. They are the thing that is more of an identification about the place, like what is it I'm trying to say about the architecture or the structure. So I'm looking for elements that will speak to the storyline or the narrative of the experience that we would have within this structure. So for this piece specifically behind me in this exhibition, this piece is based off of a collaboration with the Chinook Winds Woodwind Quintet out of Great Falls. And we worked together collaboratively to find a way to illustrate and represent this composition of music. And it was about iron horses, and so it was about the Industrial Revolution. And I found imagery that talked about things that were built structures or built objects for either play or for the advancement of civilization, like train tracks and things for building like ladders. And there's, I think, some air travel in there. And other things that are both play, like taken from built things that could be called entertainment, but also things for work, like the train tracks.
What questions are you asking yourself in the studio right now?
Oh, I always ask myself the question, what else? What else could this be? What else could this say? What else am I thinking about? What is the meaning behind the inherent definition of something? So not just the first read or the cliche, but looking beyond the surface to see what else is holding things together. I have this idea that within the structure, we have a perception of what should happen there. And if we take that perception away, what's holding it together? And so this idea that within the structures, we are trusting that it's being held by something, and where is that trust? And I, in my work, try to create a sense of destabilization and chaos so that the viewer can come to the piece and find that trust and stabilization as they are standing strong in front of it. So playing a little bit with destabilization, decentering, and deconstruction in the work to create the experience for that, the opposite experience for the viewer, recognizing that they are standing stable and not ensconced in that chaos.
So you're talking about a viewer having a relationship with the work, making that connection of they're stabilized and your work is not. And there's other sorts of interactions happening. So what types of relationships are happening in the elements in your work?
I think I'm always interested in what layering does. So looking through things, but also layering items, elements, experiences together. So within the work, I find that it's not just like physical layers, but the layering of the abstracted elements, the color, the imagery, the line work. And then I ask for the viewer to think about like each one being a different storyline. So the linear drawings being something that's very definitive and narrative and illustrative. The abstraction in the ink work being what might be like the fuzzy areas of understanding, or the perception of what a space feels like. And then the color being maybe like the emotion that goes with it, like what is it that means to be high or low? What does color mean, not only like musically, but also visually and like emotionally, like what is it that all comes to that? I wouldn't say that my work is emotional. I think it's about understanding or dissecting architectural space from a psychology point of view, but I think it's a lot about perception of space. So taking experience and providing a new narrative within all of the elements.
How does your work exemplify contemporary themes seen prevalent in the art world?
I think that drawing is the practice that I most associate my work with. I think I use color, and I'm a painter as well, but I think a lot of my work falls into this idea of drawing, like illustrating, using ink, finding flat surfaces. I think that hasn't always been considered the most like demanding art form. And so it's really entering into a new phase in contemporary art where drawing is a practice in and of itself. And my work has gotten larger, and so a lot of it is installation-based, and it sits in the middle of the room instead of on the wall. And I think my practice of going bigger and giving the viewer a chance to explore around a drawing instead of just in front of it is a way to expand the conversation in the contemporary art world.
So I'm thinking about your motivations to create art. You talked a lot about curiosity. Are there other motivations that push you to speak from this perspective of perception of space?
I think I'm a collector of spaces and places, and that's one reason that I enjoy travel so much. So everywhere that I visit gives me an opportunity to navigate a new space, to perceive what this kind of structure would be, whether it's a neighborhood or whether it's in a specific building. I think there's new ways to embrace place with space. And I think that's the thing that, is a moment of inspiration in my studio practice, is collecting new experiences in new places. And part of that is travel internationally, along with the study abroad trip that we take every other year, but along with personal travel. Experiencing cultures, I think, is one way to expand the experience of place. And so I'm pairing like cultural studies with the architecture to find out like how are other humans living around the world. Like it's not just my perspective, but it's finding the perception and perspective of others and adding that to the conversation and making sure that I get to have experience similar so that I can speak to it from a first-person perspective.
I'm different genres of art. You've collaborated with, you said, the Great Falls Orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other collaborations that you are thinking about or planning for future work?
I really enjoy collaborating. I think it's fun to work with another artist or group of people. It's also extremely challenging, so it helps me grow in my studio to bump up against another artist and work with their ideas as well. I've collaborated with artist Amber Van Hatelestein on a drawing project that we mailed back and forth. I've collaborated with the Chinook Winds Woodwind Quintet, which was a musical genre, so it provided a different type of art form. But you know, music and art isn't that different. They use a lot of the same terminology, like composition and tone and color and rhythm and pattern. Those are all part of our elements of design as well. And while it was time-based and my work is very static, it was fun to try to attempt to encompass time within a two-dimensional piece. I'm looking forward to collaborating with other artists in the future, but I will reveal those as they get rolled out.
Is there anything else that you would like to share about this piece or your work in general?
I think what I would ask viewers when they enter an art gallery is that they take the time to spend looking at the artwork, spending time with the artwork in the exhibition to really see what's behind the surface. So any of the artworks in this faculty exhibition have meaning and concept and content behind it. And I make work for the viewer to be entertained for a while. I want them to need to spend time in front of their artwork, looking and seeing and continuing to look. So complexity is a really important value for me. Seeing the labor that goes into a piece is something I value, and so I want to give the viewer an opportunity to have something that will reward them if they take the time. It doesn't have to be full and complex. It can be simple and quiet, but it needs to be valuable. Our work needs to be valuable both at the whole viewing distance and as well when you get up close. So I always want to offer the viewer a reward if they get up close to the work, and I want to draw them in from far away. They get to travel, like I like to travel. They get to travel from outside to inside. It's always great to share art, and I hope that everyone takes a moment to dig deep into the artwork that they find fascinating. So take a moment, stop by the exhibitions we have in the gallery, and be part of the art department. That's all.